You need to give your $4 million inheritance to your sister. My father said this to me in front of 7 people. My sister had gambled away every dollar she'd ever been given, lost her marriage, destroyed 3 businesses, and now my parents wanted me to hand over the money my grandfather left me. But here's what nobody at that table knew. I wasn't just some mid-level manager making $75,000 a year. I owned 60% of my father's company, $13.2 million in shares I'd been secretly buying for 7 years. Every time he sold equity to investment groups, that was me. He didn't own his business anymore. I did. And in the next 20 minutes, I was about to prove it. Drop a like if you've ever been underestimated. This is what happened. My name is Ethan Clarke, and I'm 29 years old. For the past 7 years, I've worked at Clarke Industries, the manufacturing company my father built from the ground up over 35 years. On paper, I was a senior operations manager. I had a decent office on the 3rd floor, a company car, and a salary that most people would consider comfortable. What nobody in my family knew was that I was also the majority shareholder of the entire company. But let me back up even further, because to understand how we got to that dinner, you need to understand my family. I have one sister, Sophia. She's 35, 6 years older than me. Growing up, Sophia was everything. She was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. When she wanted to go to Princeton, my parents paid the full $70,000 a year tuition without blinking. When she dropped out after 2 years because she didn't feel challenged, they supported her decision. When she wanted to try Stanford instead, they paid for that too. She lasted 1 semester. Then came the business ventures. My parents gave her $200,000 to start a boutique consulting firm when she was 25. She burned through it in 8 months and had nothing to show for it. At 27, they funded her tech startup with another $300,000. It never launched a single product. At 30, they bought her a partnership stake in a friend's marketing agency for $450,000. She managed to get kicked out by her own business partners within 18 months for misusing company funds. Every single time my parents bailed her out. Every single time they told her it wasn't her fault. The economy was bad. Her partners were jealous. The market wasn't ready. She was too innovative for people to understand. My story was different. When I graduated high school with a 3.8 GPA and got accepted to the state university, my father sat me down in his office. I remember that conversation like it was yesterday. He leaned back in his leather chair, the same chair he'd had for 20 years, and said, "Ethan, I've been thinking you're a smart kid. But you know what made me successful? I worked my way through college. I didn't have anyone handing me anything. I think that's what you need too. It'll make you stronger." I was accepted to the business program. Tuition was $18,000 a year, which was actually reasonable compared to Sophia's schools. I asked if they could help with even half of it. My father said no. He said I needed to learn the value of hard work. He said it would build character. So I got a job. Actually, I got 3 jobs. I worked at a campus bookstore from 6 to 10 in the morning. I went to classes. I worked at a restaurant from 4 to 9 at night. On weekends, I did freelance bookkeeping for small businesses I found on Craigslist. I slept about 4 hours a night for 4 years. I graduated with a 3.7 GPA and $12,000 in student loans. The day I graduated, my father shook my hand and told me he was proud of how I'd learned responsibility. Then he offered me a job at Clarke Industries as a junior analyst making $42,000 a year. Sophia's 3rd business had just failed. My parents bought her a luxury 2-bedroom apartment in the city as a fresh start. It cost them $850,000. I'm not telling you this to make you feel sorry for me. I'm telling you this because it's important to understand the pattern. It's important to understand that by the time I was 22 years old, I understood exactly how my family worked. Sophia was the one they invested in. I was the one who was supposed to be grateful for the opportunity to prove myself. But here's what my father didn't understand about teaching me to work hard. When you teach someone that nobody is going to save them, that they have to save themselves, they get very, very good at it. That same year I graduated, I took $8,000 I'd saved from my bookkeeping side business and invested it in cryptocurrency. This was 2016. Bitcoin was around $400. Ethereum had just launched. I did my research, spread my investment across 3 different coins, and watched. By the end of 2017, my $8,000 had turned into $340,000. I could have bought a house. I could have bought a nice car. Instead, I did something else. Clarke Industries was a privately held company. My father owned 70%. My mother owned 20%. The remaining 10% was split between two early investors who'd helped my father start the company decades ago. The company was valued at around $19 million at the time. One of those early investors, a man named Gerald Pemberton, was 68 years old and wanted to retire. He owned 5% of the company. I approached him privately and offered to buy his shares. He sold them to me for $950,000. I had $340,000 from my crypto investment. I took out a loan for the rest, using the shares themselves as collateral. I set up an LLC to hold the shares. I named it Parker Holdings after my grandmother's maiden name. I made sure everything was completely legal and completely private. My father never knew. The transaction was reported to the company's board, but it was listed as Parker Holdings LLC, buying Gerald's stake. My father assumed it was some random investment group. I was 23 years old and I owned 5% of my family's company. Over the next 6 years, I didn't stop. I worked at Clarke Industries and I was good at my job, really good. I got promoted to operations manager at 25. I increased efficiency in our main production line by 17%. I renegotiated 3 supplier contracts that saved the company over $2 million annually. I was making $75,000 a year by the time I was 27, and my father would occasionally pat me on the back and tell me I was finally living up to my potential. But the whole time, I was building something else. I invested every spare dollar I made. I learned about the stock market. I learned about real estate investment trusts. I learned about tax optimization strategies and offshore accounts, and how wealthy people actually build wealth. By the time I was 26, I'd turned my $340,000 into $1.2 million. The second early investor, Margaret Chen, owned the other 5%. When she decided to sell at age 73, I bought her shares for $1.1 million. I now owned 10% of Clarke Industries through Parker Holdings. But I didn't stop there. My father, for all his business sense, had one weakness. He was old school. He didn't really understand modern finance. When the company needed capital for expansion, he would sometimes sell small portions of his own stake rather than take on debt. He did it 3 times between 2019 and 2023. 1% here, 2% there, 3% another time. Every single time I bought those shares through Parker Holdings, my father thought he was selling to different investment groups, different shell companies. He never realized they were all me. By the time I was 28 years old, I owned 16% of Clarke Industries. Then came the big one. In 2023, my father wanted to do a major expansion. He wanted to open 2 new manufacturing facilities in different states. It was going to cost approximately $8 million. He didn't want to take on that much debt, so he decided to sell a large stake of his ownership to a private equity firm. I made him a better offer through Parker Holdings. I offered $8.5 million for 44% of his shares. It was more than the PE firm was offering and it came with fewer strings attached. He accepted. Just like that, at 28 years old, I owned 60% of Clarke Industries. My father owned only 26% now. My mother still had 20%. A few small shareholders owned the remaining 14%, but I was the majority owner. I controlled the company, and nobody in my family had any idea. The only person who knew was Martin Foster, the company's CFO. He'd been with my father for 18 years, and he was a brilliant financial mind. When he started seeing all the Parker Holdings transactions, he did some digging. It took him about 8 months, but he eventually figured out it was me. I thought I was finished when he called me into his office one day. I was 29. I'd just completed the final purchase that gave me majority control. I sat down across from him and he looked at me for a long moment. Then he smiled. "I'm not going to tell your father," he said. "What you've done here is one of the most impressive things I've seen in 30 years of finance. You've quietly acquired majority stake in a company while working inside it, and you've done it completely legally and completely ethically. That takes skill, patience, and intelligence that most people don't have." He leaned forward. "But I need to know your intentions. Are you planning to gut this company? Sell it off? Fire everyone?" I told him the truth. I said I loved Clarke Industries. I'd grown up watching my father build it. I'd spent 7 years working there, and I genuinely cared about the 230 employees who depended on it. I had no intention of destroying anything. I just wanted control of my own future. I wanted to make sure that nobody could ever take away what I'd built. Martin nodded. He said he'd keep my secret, but he also said, "Eventually you're going to have to tell them. You can't hide ownership like this forever. And when you do tell them, It's going to be explosive. I knew he was right, but I wasn't ready yet. That was 4 months ago. Now let me tell you about Sophia's situation, because that's what led to the dinner that changed everything. While I was building my fortune, Sophia was destroying hers. After the marketing agency disaster, my parents bought her another apartment, this one for $600,000. They gave her an allowance of $5,000 a month so she could focus on finding her passion. They paid for life coaching, career coaching, and 3 different therapists. Sophia spent most of her time traveling and partying. She had an Instagram with 42,000 followers where she posted pictures from Dubai, Bali, Monaco, and the Maldives. She called herself a lifestyle entrepreneur and an influencer, but as far as I could tell, she'd never earned a dollar from it. Then, about 2 years ago, she started dating a guy named Trevor Ashford. Trevor came from money, old East Coast wealth. They got engaged after 6 months. My parents spent $320,000 on the wedding. It was at a vineyard in Napa Valley. There were 250 guests. Sophia wore a Vera Wang dress that cost $38,000. The marriage lasted 11 months. I never got all the details, but from what I pieced together from family conversations, Sophia had gotten involved with online gambling. It started with poker, then sports betting, then online casinos. By the time Trevor figured it out, she'd gone through $280,000 of their joint savings. He filed for divorce. He got a good lawyer. Because the gambling happened during the marriage and she'd hidden it from him, the prenup she'd signed was considered void due to fraud. He got the apartment they'd bought together, a vacation home in Aspen, and she had to pay him $150,000 in the settlement. Sophia was suddenly broke, and not just broke but in debt, because apparently the $280,000 she'd gambled away wasn't just their savings. She'd also taken out personal loans. She owed approximately $380,000 to various lenders, including some that weren't exactly legal. My parents, of course, bailed her out. They paid off the $150,000 to Trevor. They paid off about $200,000 in legitimate loans, but the remaining $180,000 was owed to what my father delicately referred to as private lenders. Those were the ones they couldn't pay off quickly without raising questions about where the money went. The plan, as my father explained to my mother in a conversation I overheard at a family barbecue 3 months ago, was to use inheritance money to cover it. See, my grandfather, my father's father, had passed away 8 years ago. He'd left a trust fund that was split between me and Sophia, $4 million for each of us. The trust was structured so that we'd get access to it when we turned 30. Sophia had gotten hers when she turned 30 5 years ago. She'd burned through $3.6 million in those 5 years, and the remaining $400,000 was tied up in the divorce settlement. I was turning 30 in 4 months. My father's plan was to ask me to give my inheritance to Sophia so she could pay off her remaining debts and have a chance to start fresh. The barbecue was where I first heard them discussing it. I was in the kitchen getting a drink when I heard my father's voice coming from his study. The door was open just a crack. "We can't let those people come after her, Margaret," he was saying to my mother. "They're not the kind of people who just forget about money they're owed. We need to handle this before it gets worse." "But Robert, that's Ethan's money," my mother said. "It's his inheritance from your father. We can't just ask him to give it up." "It's family," my father said. His voice had that tone he got when he'd made up his mind about something. "Ethan is doing fine. He has a good job, a steady income, no debts. He's young. He has his whole life to build wealth. Sophia needs this now. She's in real trouble. Have you thought about how you're going to ask him?" "I'll sit him down. Explain the situation. He's a reasonable kid. He'll understand that family comes first." I stood there in that kitchen for a long time after they went back outside. Something was building in my chest. It wasn't anger exactly. It was something colder than that. My whole life I'd been the one who had to be reasonable, the one who had to be patient, the one who had to work harder because that's what built character. Sophia got the private schools and the apartments and the business funding and the weddings, and I got to be proud of myself for paying my own way. And now they wanted my inheritance too. The inheritance my grandfather left specifically to me because, as he told me before he died, "You're the one who reminds me of myself, Ethan. You don't expect the world to hand you anything. That's rare and it's valuable." They wanted me to give $4 million to my sister who'd gambled away every cent anyone had ever given her. I made a decision right then. It was time for them to know the truth. I called Martin Foster the next day and told him what I'd heard. I said I needed to have the ownership documents prepared to present to my family. He said he'd have everything ready within a week. But before I could arrange a meeting, my father beat me to it. 2 weeks after the barbecue, my mother called and asked if I could come to dinner at the house that Saturday evening. She said they wanted to discuss something important as a family. Her voice had that tight quality it got when she was stressed. I knew what it was about. I said yes. That Saturday, I drove to my parents' estate in Greenwich. It's a beautiful property, 6 acres with a main house that has 8 bedrooms, a pool house, and gardens that my mother spends a fortune maintaining. I'd grown up in this house. I knew every room, every corner, every creaky floorboard. I arrived at 6:30. My father answered the door. He was wearing slacks and a polo shirt, his standard evening casual attire. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Ethan, good to see you," he said, shaking my hand. His grip was firm but brief. "Everyone's in the dining room." I followed him through the marble foyer, past the living room with its white couches that Sophia and I had never been allowed to sit on as children, and into the dining room. The table was set for 7 people. My mother was there, wearing a navy dress and pearls. Sophia was sitting next to her, looking thinner than I'd seen her in years. She was wearing a gray sweater that looked expensive but somehow sat on her. Her hair, usually styled perfectly, was pulled back in a simple ponytail. There were 3 other people I didn't expect. My Uncle Thomas, my father's younger brother, was sitting at the far end of the table. Next to him was my Aunt Linda, my mother's sister. And in between them was a man I didn't recognize initially, but then I realized it was Christopher Brennan, Sophia's ex-fiancé from about 8 years ago, before Trevor. Christopher had been engaged to Sophia for about a year before she'd abruptly broken it off. I hadn't seen him since. "Christopher," I said, shaking his hand. "This is a surprise." "Good to see you, Ethan," he said. His smile was polite but reserved. "Your parents invited me. Said they wanted to discuss some family matters and thought I might have relevant perspective." That was cryptic, but I didn't push it. I took my seat across from Sophia. She looked at me briefly, then looked away. She seemed nervous. My mother brought out dinner. Roasted chicken, vegetables, potatoes. It was nice, but there was a tension in the air that made it hard to enjoy. Everyone made small talk for the first 20 minutes. Uncle Thomas talked about his boat. Aunt Linda discussed her garden club. Christopher mentioned his new job at a financial consulting firm. Nobody talked about why we were really there. Finally, as my mother was clearing the main course plates, my father stood up. He cleared his throat, which was his tell that he was about to make an important announcement. "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight," he said. "I know this is unusual, having a family meeting like this, but Margaret and I felt it was important to have the people who care about this family present for this conversation." He looked at me. "Ethan, you know that your grandfather left you and Sophia each a $4 million trust. Sophia received hers when she turned 30. You're going to receive yours when you turn 30 in a few months." I nodded. I didn't say anything. "Sophia has been going through a very difficult time," he continued. "Her marriage to Trevor ended badly, and she's been struggling to get back on her feet. She's made some mistakes. She'll be the first to admit that." He glanced at Sophia. She was staring at her plate. "The situation is this," my father said, and now his voice took on that tone, the one that meant he was being reasonable, and therefore expected everyone else to be reasonable too. "Sophia has some outstanding debts that need to be addressed. Significant debts, the kind that don't just go away. We've helped as much as we can, but there's still about $180,000 that needs to be paid, and frankly, we don't have the liquid capital to cover it right now without making some business decisions we're not ready to make." I stayed quiet. "You, on the other hand," my father continued, "are in a very good place in life. You have a steady job. You're making a good salary. You have no debts. You're young and you have your whole future ahead of you to build wealth. You don't need $4 million right now. Sophia does." He paused, then said the words I'd known were coming. "We're asking you to give your inheritance to your sister." The room was completely silent. 6 pairs of eyes were on me. I took a slow breath, then said, "No." My father blinked. "I'm sorry?" I said no. I repeated calmly, "I'm not giving Sophia my inheritance." My mother leaned forward. "Ethan, sweetheart, I know this is a lot to ask, but this is about family. Sophia is in real trouble. These aren't the kind of people you want to owe money to. We're talking about her safety." "Then you pay it," I said simply. "You've paid for everything else in her life. Pay for this too." "We don't have it," my father said, and there was an edge creeping into his voice now. I just told you we don't have that kind of liquid capital right now. Sell something, I suggested. This house is worth at least $6 million. You could downsize, or sell some of your equity in Clarke Industries. My father's face was reddening. This is about family, Ethan. About taking care of each other. Your grandfather would have wanted you to help your sister. Really? I asked. Is that why he left the money to each of us individually instead of in one shared trust? Is that why he told me specifically that I reminded him of himself because I didn't expect handouts? Sophia finally spoke. Her voice was small. I didn't want to ask this of you, Ethan, I really didn't. But I'm desperate. I made mistakes. Bad ones. I got involved with gambling and I couldn't stop, and now I'm in debt to people who are threatening me. Mom and Dad have helped so much already, but there's only so much they can do. You're my brother. I need you. There were tears in her eyes. Real ones, I thought. She looked genuinely scared. For a moment, just a moment, I felt bad. Then Christopher cleared his throat. May I say something? He asked. My father looked annoyed at the interruption, but he nodded. Christopher looked at Sophia. I didn't want to do this here. Your parents asked me to come because they thought I might be able to provide context about your situation, but I think they didn't know the full story of why we broke up. Sophia's face went pale. Sophia and I were together for almost 2 years, Christopher said. We were engaged. We were planning a life together. I loved her. He paused. When we got engaged, we opened a joint savings account. We were both putting money into it for the wedding, for a down payment on a house. Over 18 months, we saved about $150,000. Half was mine, half was hers. Oh no, I thought. 6 months before the wedding, Christopher continued, I went to check the account balance. It was empty. All $150,000 was gone. When I confronted Sophia, she initially denied knowing anything about it. Then she said someone must have hacked the account. Eventually, after I showed her the withdrawal records that required her fingerprint authorization, she admitted she'd taken it. Sophia was crying now, quiet tears streaming down her face. She'd been gambling online, Christopher said. She said she'd meant to win it back before I noticed. She said it was a mistake and she'd pay me back. I told her we'd work through it together if she got help. I offered to go to counseling with her. She refused. She said she didn't have a problem. She said I was being controlling and untrusting. He looked at my parents. She broke off the engagement 2 weeks later, told everyone I was too demanding. I never told anyone the real reason because I didn't want to hurt her or embarrass your family. But I lost $75,000 in the person I thought I was going to marry. The silence after Christopher spoke was deafening. My father looked at Sophia. Is this true? She wiped her eyes. It was 8 years ago. I was different then. I was younger. You did the same thing to Trevor, I said quietly. Everyone looked at me. You went through $280,000 of your joint savings gambling. The same exact pattern. How do you know about that? My father demanded. Everyone knows, I said. It's not exactly a secret. Trevor's lawyer made sure the details came out in the divorce proceedings. Aunt Linda spoke up. She'd been quiet this whole time, but now her voice was sharp. This isn't the first time either. Sophia, you borrowed $23,000 from me 4 years ago. You said it was for a business investment. You never paid me back. When I finally pressed you about it, you said the business fell through and you'd lost the money. Did you gamble that away too? Sophia's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Uncle Thomas nodded slowly. And you asked me for $40,000 about 3 years back. Said it was for an apartment security deposit. Same story. Never saw that money again. My father looked shaken. Why didn't either of you tell me about this? Because every time anyone has ever had a problem with Sophia, you've defended her. Uncle Thomas said bluntly. You've made it clear that she's your golden child and the rest of us are just supposed to accept it. My mother was crying now too. Sophia, sweetheart, if you have a problem, we'll get you help. Real help. Rehab, therapy, whatever you need. I don't have a problem, Sophia shouted suddenly, startling everyone. I had bad luck a few times, that's all. Bad luck and bad people. Everyone makes mistakes. Bad luck 3 times over 8 years with 3 different people? I asked. That's not bad luck, that's a pattern. She turned on me and suddenly the scared, sad woman was gone, and there was anger in her eyes. Pure rage. This is easy for you to judge, isn't it? She hissed. Perfect Ethan, who worked his way through college, who never asks for anything, who has his little $75,000 job and acts like he's better than everyone. You have no idea what it's like to have expectations, to have people waiting for you to fail. You're right. I said. I don't know what it's like to have people waiting for me to fail. I know what it's like to have people expect me to fail and then work twice as hard to prove them wrong. My father slammed his hand on the table. Enough, both of you. He took a breath, composing himself. Ethan, I understand you're upset, but this doesn't change the situation. Your sister needs help. You have the means to help her. I'm asking you as your father to do the right thing and give her your inheritance. I looked at him for a long moment. You want to give away my inheritance? I asked quietly. Yes, he said firmly. Family comes first. Here's the thing, Dad, I said. You can't give away something you don't own. My father frowned. What are you talking about? That inheritance is yours. It becomes available when you turn 30. I reached into the bag I'd brought with me. I'd been carrying the documents Martin had prepared just in case. I pulled out a folder and set it on the table. You're right that I have an inheritance, I said, but that's not the only thing I own. I opened the folder and pulled out the top document. It was the ownership summary of Clarke Industries prepared by Martin and certified by our corporate lawyers. Clarke Industries is valued at approximately $22 million, I said. You currently own 26% of it. That's about $5.7 million. Mom owns 20%, about $4.4 million. Various small shareholders own 14%. I slid the document across the table to my father. I own 60%. That's $13.2 million. My father picked up the document. He stared at it. His face went from confused to disbelieving to shocked in about 10 seconds. What is this? He whispered. That's the official ownership registry of Clarke Industries, I said. Filed with the state and certified by our corporate attorneys. I've been buying shares for 7 years. I own the majority stake. I am the primary owner of the company. My mother grabbed the document from my father's hands. She read it, her eyes getting wider. Parker Holdings, she said. That's you? That's me, I confirmed. I set up an LLC 7 years ago to purchase shares. Every time you sold equity, Dad, you sold it to me. Every time an early investor wanted to cash out, they sold to me. Over 7 years, I quietly acquired 60% ownership. The room erupted. This is impossible, my father said. Where did you get this kind of money? I earned it, I said simply. I invested money I made from side work in cryptocurrency in 2016. Turned $8,000 into $340,000. Used that to buy my first 5% from Gerald Pemberton. Spent the next 6 years investing every spare dollar I made, learning about finance and markets and wealth building. Made smart investments. Saved aggressively. When you decided to sell that 44% stake last year, I had the cash to buy it. Uncle Thomas was staring at me with something like awe. You're telling me you put together over $8 million by the time you were 28? 8.5, I corrected. And yes, my father was shaking his head. This can't be legal. You can't just buy a company out from under someone. It's completely legal, I said. Martin Foster, our CFO, knows. He's verified every transaction. Every purchase was done at fair market value. Every document was filed properly. I own 60% of Clarke Industries, Dad. Legally, properly, and completely. I looked at Sophia, who was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. You spent 10 years calling me the one who would never amount to anything without the family business, I said to her. Told me I'd never be successful without Dad's help. Let me introduce myself properly. I'm Ethan Clarke, majority owner of Clarke Industries. $13.2 million in company equity. That doesn't count my other investments, which total another $4.3 million. I'm worth over $17 million. I built it myself, from $22,000 I saved working 60-hour weeks in college while you were burning through your third private university tuition. I turned to my parents. You wanted to give my $4 million inheritance to Sophia so she could pay off gambling debts? Here's the thing. That inheritance is already a drop in the bucket compared to what I've built. But it's not about the money. It's about what it represents. It was Grandpa's way of saying he believed in me, the one person in this family who saw me clearly and valued me for who I actually am. My voice was steady, but I felt something breaking inside. Not breaking from sadness, breaking from finally letting out words I'd held back for 29 years. I'm not giving it to her, I said. Not because I don't love my sister, not because I want to see her hurt, but because giving money to someone with a gambling addiction doesn't help them. It enables them. And I've watched you enable her my entire life. You've given her millions of dollars over the years, millions. And where is she now? Broke, in debt, and asking for more. My mother was sobbing openly now. Ethan, I don't understand. Why didn't you tell us? Why did you hide this? Because it was mine, I said. It was the one thing I built that you couldn't take credit for or give to Sophia instead. It was proof that I could make something of myself without your help, without your approval, without being second place in your eyes. My father's hands were shaking as he held the document. You work for me, he said, and his voice was hollow. You report to me. No, I said quietly. You work for me. You're an employee of a company I own. You have a 26% stake, which makes you a significant shareholder, but I control 60% of voting rights. I am, legally and practically, your boss. The weight of that statement settled over the room. Sophia found her voice. It was shrill. This is insane. You've been lying to everyone for years. You've been sneaking around, buying up the family company, hiding it from everyone. What kind of person does that? The kind who learned that he couldn't trust his family to treat him fairly, I said. I wasn't angry anymore. I just felt tired. The kind who was told his entire childhood that he had to work for everything while watching his sister be handed everything. The kind who was told to be grateful for the opportunity to prove himself, while his sister was told she was special just for existing. I stood up. I'm not giving you my inheritance, Sophia. I will, however, make you one offer. I will pay for you to go to a legitimate gambling addiction treatment center. 6 months, fully residential, the best facility in the country. It'll cost about $90,000. I'll pay for it in full, but you have to actually go. You have to actually commit to recovery. If you complete the program, I'll pay for an additional year of outpatient therapy and counseling. Sophia's face twisted. I don't need rehab. I told you, I don't have a problem. Then you don't need my money, I said simply. I looked at my parents. My father looked like he'd aged 10 years in the last hour. My mother was still crying. I'm sorry this is how you're finding out, I said, and I meant it. I never wanted to hurt you, but I'm not sorry for what I built, and I'm not sorry for protecting it from being given away. I picked up my folder and headed for the door. Ethan, wait, my father called out. I stopped but didn't turn around. Is this how you want this to end? He asked. With you walking out? With the family torn apart? I turned back to face him. Dad, the family was torn apart a long time ago, I said. You just didn't notice because you were too busy funding Sophia's next disaster to see that you had a son who was drowning and never asked for help because he knew none was coming. I walked out of that house and drove back to my apartment in the city. I felt numb, relieved and sad and angry and free all at once. That was 3 months ago. The aftermath was complicated. The first week after the dinner, I got 47 text messages and 23 voicemails from my mother. Most were crying. Some were angry. All of them wanted me to reconsider and think about family. I got 3 messages from my father. The first one said, "We need to talk about company business." The second said, "This situation is unacceptable." The third said nothing except, "Call me." I got 2 messages from Sophia. The first one was voicemail, her screaming that I'd destroyed the family and that I was dead to her. The second one, which came a week later, was a text. "You'll regret this." I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I called Martin Foster and told him it was time to make some changes. First, we called a board meeting. Clarke Industries had a small board. My father, my mother, Martin, 2 outside advisors, and me. As the majority shareholder, I had the right to call a meeting. I brought lawyers. At the meeting, I laid out my vision for the company. I made it clear that I had no intention of pushing my father out or destroying what he'd built. I loved Clarke Industries. I wanted it to thrive. But I also made it clear that going forward, major decisions would require my approval. My father sat through the entire presentation in silence. At the end, he asked one question: "What's my role now?" "Whatever you want it to be," I told him honestly. "You built this company. You know it inside and out. I want you to stay on as president of operations. You'll oversee day-to-day management, report to me quarterly, and continue drawing your current salary of $300,000 per year. You'll keep your 26% ownership stake and all the benefits that come with it. But final authority on major expenditures, expansions, and strategic direction goes through me." He took 2 weeks to think about it. Then he agreed. The truth was, he didn't have much choice. If he'd tried to fight me, I had the voting power to remove him entirely. This way, he kept his dignity, his role, and a very comfortable income. My mother was harder. She called me crying multiple times those first few weeks. She kept saying she didn't understand how I could do this to the family. She kept insisting that Sophia needed help and I was abandoning her in her darkest hour. Finally, I drove to the house one afternoon when I knew my father wouldn't be home. I sat my mother down in the kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd worked on homework while she made dinner for 17 years. And I told her everything. I told her about working 3 jobs in college while Sophia's tuition checks bounced and my parents wired more money. I told her about eating ramen for dinner 6 nights a week, while Sophia posted Instagram photos from St. Bart's. I told her about the conversation I'd overheard about being the reasonable one who would give up his inheritance. I told her that I didn't hate Sophia. I actually felt sorry for her, but I couldn't enable her any more than they already had. She needs consequences, I said. Real ones. Not bailouts. Not safety nets. Not people telling her it's not her fault. She needs to hit rock bottom and realize that nobody is going to save her except herself. My mother cried through most of this conversation. When I was done, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I didn't realize how badly we'd failed you." "You didn't fail me," I said, and I meant it. "You taught me that I had to save myself, and I did. That's valuable. It's just that it also meant I learned I couldn't rely on you, and that part hurt." She asked if we could rebuild our relationship. I said maybe, but it would take time, and it would require her to actually see me, not just the version of me she wanted me to be. As for Sophia, I didn't hear from her directly for 2 months, but I heard about her. She'd moved in with a friend, some woman she knew from her socialite days. That lasted 3 weeks before the friend kicked her out after Sophia borrowed her credit card without asking and racked up $4,000 in charges. She'd tried to get a job at a luxury boutique. They'd let her go after 5 days when a customer complained that Sophia had spent 20 minutes talking about her own problems instead of helping with the sale. She'd tried to borrow money from Uncle Thomas again. He said no. She'd tried to borrow money from Aunt Linda. Also no. Eventually, about 10 weeks after our dinner confrontation, the people she owed money to lost patience. I don't know exactly what happened, but I know they showed up at my parents' house looking for her. My father called the police. There was a report filed. It became very real very fast. That's when Sophia finally hit bottom. She called me at 2 in the morning 11 weeks after the dinner. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Ethan?" Her voice was small, broken. "I need help." I drove to where she was staying, a motel on the outskirts of town that charged by the week. She looked terrible. She'd lost weight. Her clothes were wrinkled. Her eyes were red from crying. She told me she was ready to admit she had a problem, ready to get help. I called the treatment facility the next morning. They had an opening. I paid the $93,000 for 6 months of residential treatment. I drove her there myself. She's been there for 7 weeks now. I get weekly updates from her counselor. She says Sophia is making progress. She's participating in group therapy. She's working through the underlying issues that drove her to gambling. She's facing the damage she's caused. I visited twice. Both times were hard. Sophia's different there, quieter, more honest, more broken, but in a way that might actually lead to healing. At my last visit, 2 weeks ago, she said something I never expected to hear. "I'm sorry," she said. We were sitting in a common room with beige walls and fluorescent lighting. "I'm sorry for everything, for how I treated you growing up, for the things I said at dinner, for spending my entire life taking everything for granted while you worked for everything. I'm sorry it took losing everything for me to see it." I didn't cry, but it was close. "I forgive you," I told her, and I meant it, but I also told her the truth. Forgiveness doesn't mean everything goes back to normal. It means I'm letting go of anger. But trust? That has to be rebuilt, and that takes time. A lot of time. She nodded. She understood. As for my parents, things are slowly improving. Slowly. My father and I have a professional relationship that's respectful but not warm. He does his job. I do mine. We're civil. My mother tries harder. She calls me once a week. We talk about surface things mostly. The weather, Clarke Industries, Sophia's progress. It's not deep, but it's something. Last week, my father did something unexpected. He called me into his office at Clarke Industries. He asked me to sit down. Then he said, "I've been thinking about what you said at that dinner, about how we treated you. You were right." I didn't say anything. I just waited. "I thought I was teaching you to be strong," he continued. "I thought making you work for everything would make you appreciate it more, make you tougher. But what I actually did was make you feel like you weren't worth investing in, like Sophia was worth millions and you were worth, Whatever you could earn yourself. His voice cracked slightly. I'm proud of what you built, he said. I'm proud that you were smart enough and disciplined enough to do what you did, but I'm sorry that you felt you had to hide it from me. I'm sorry that you couldn't trust me to celebrate your success instead of taking credit for it or comparing it to Sophia. It wasn't a perfect apology. It didn't fix everything, but it was something. Thank you, I told him. That means a lot. We're not where we used to be. I don't know if we ever will be, but we're somewhere different, somewhere more honest. The company is thriving. I've implemented some changes that have increased efficiency by 22%. We've expanded into 2 new markets. Revenue is up 18% over last year. Martin Foster told me last month that I've proven to be a better strategic leader than he expected. And coming from Martin, that's high praise. I'm living in a new penthouse apartment in Manhattan. It has floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of Central Park. I bought it outright. No mortgage. It's mine. I earned it. Nobody can take it from me. I still work as much as I used to, but now it's because I want to, not because I have to prove something. There's freedom in that. 3 weeks ago, I had lunch with Christopher Brennan, Sophia's ex-fiancé, who'd come to that dinner. He reached out and said he wanted to apologize for springing that story on everyone. I told him he had nothing to apologize for. He'd spoken the truth, and sometimes the truth is painful but necessary. We ended up talking for 3 hours. Turns out he's a good guy. He's engaged now to a woman who works in healthcare. He seems happy. He said he doesn't hold a grudge against Sophia. He hopes she gets better. But he also said he's glad he found out who she was before they got married and had kids. Smart man. Yesterday, I turned 30. The $4 million inheritance from my grandfather officially became available. I withdrew it and immediately set up a trust in my grandfather's name, the Grandfather Richard Clarke Educational Trust. It'll provide scholarships to first-generation college students who are working their way through school. Kids like me. Kids who don't have parents writing checks but who have drive and intelligence and are willing to work for it. The first scholarships will go out next fall. 40 students, full tuition, room, board, and a stipend for books. All of it funded by the money my grandfather left me, which would have been gone in 2 years if I'd given it to Sophia. I think he would have approved. My mother sent me a birthday card. Inside she'd written, "I'm learning to see you for who you really are, not who I assumed you were. Thank you for being patient with me. I love you." My father sent a text. "Happy birthday, son. Proud of you." Sophia sent a message through her counselor. She said she was sorry she couldn't be there, but she was thinking of me. She said she hoped one day she could earn back my trust enough to have a real relationship again. I hope that too. I really do. But I'm also okay if it doesn't happen, because I've learned something important over the past few months. You can love your family and still choose yourself. You can forgive people without letting them back into your life on their terms. You can be compassionate without being a doormat. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is let people face the consequences of their choices. Because consequences are what teach us. They're what force us to grow. Sophia needed to lose everything to realize she had a problem. My parents needed to see the truth about their golden child and their forgotten son to realize they'd been wrong. I needed to build my fortune in secret to prove to myself that I was worth more than they'd made me feel. None of it was easy. None of it was fun. But all of it was necessary. Tonight, I'm sitting in my apartment looking out at the city lights, and I'm thinking about a conversation I had with my grandfather 2 weeks before he died. I was 21. I'd just graduated college. I'd gone to visit him in the hospital. He'd taken my hand, his grip weak but his eyes still sharp, and he'd said, "Ethan, do you know what real wealth is?" I'd shaken my head. "It's not the money," he'd said. "The money is just a tool. Real wealth is knowing your own worth, knowing what you're capable of, knowing that you don't need anyone's permission or approval to be who you are." He'd squeezed my hand. "You have that," he'd said. "I can see it in you. You're going to be just fine, better than fine, but you're going to have to fight for it. Because people will try to make you small. People will try to convince you that you need them more than you need yourself. Don't believe them." I didn't fully understand what he meant back then. I do now. Real wealth isn't what you inherit. It's what you build when nobody believes in you. It's what you create when everyone else is invested in someone else's story. It's what you achieve when you finally stop waiting for permission and start giving it to yourself. My sister lost everything because she never learned that lesson. She spent her whole life waiting for someone else to save her, someone else to fund her, someone else to fix her problems. I built everything because I learned that lesson early, sometimes by choice, sometimes by necessity, but I learned. And that's a difference that $4 million could never buy. If this story resonated with you, if it reminded you that karma is real and that building yourself up is more important than tearing others down, do me a favor. Hit that like button, drop a comment, and tell me where you're watching from. Hit subscribe and ring that bell so you don't miss the next story. And remember something important. You don't owe anyone your peace. You don't owe anyone your future. And you definitely don't owe anyone your inheritance, literal or metaphorical, just because they share your DNA. Build your life, protect your peace, and let the people who tried to take from you learn their own lessons. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one.